3 seconds before the RPG-7 streaks in, a round rips the UH-60 Black Hawk's fuel line. The pilot calls brace, brace, brace as auto-rotation fails, and the helicopter slams into a rocky mountainside. Metal screams. The cabin spins. Then everything goes dark. Avery Collins, Army Combat Medic MOS 68W, snaps back to awareness inside wreckage, coughing through smoke and JP-8 fumes. She confirms 6 Kia, including pilots and the crew chief, then checks herself with numb hands and a steady mind. Left forearm, compound fracture, right leg, ligament damage. So she cranks a cat tourniquet high and tight and rigs a field-expedient splint. She scoops an M4A1 with a partial magazine, 2 spare magazines, PRC 152, an IR strobe, survival kit, and an M18 purple smoke grenade. Through shattered plexiglass, she sees enemy fighters with AK pattern rifles closing in, and the clock in her head says 2 minutes to crawl into the tree line or die where she lies. So she moves. Before we dive in, comment where you are watching and subscribe for stories that get the details right. This episode stays grounded as we follow Army Combat Medic Avery Collins, surviving 18 hours after a UH-60 Black Hawk crash. A Marine Recon team that chooses to help. Real tactics like evasion, bounding, and smoke and move. A clean medevac on a marked LZ. And nightcast coordinated with a proper 9-line and precise MGRS. Everything is clear, human, and accurate without fluff. Up next, the silence of the hills breaks with a radio call at 2:15 a.m. soon. 18 hours earlier, the UH-60 Black Hawk runs nap of the earth through a mountain valley, skimming contours and staying low. Army Combat Medic Avery Collins MOS 68W checks her M4A1, seats, a magazine, and confirms the M18 sidearm rides secure on her hip. The crew chief sweeps the cabin while gear stays strapped. A round slices a fuel line. Then an RPG-7 slams in, and the pilot calls brace as auto-rotation fails and the helicopter hits the slope. Silence punches her awake. Smoke hangs thick with JP-8, metal pops, and her ears ring hard. She blinks through dust and tilted light, ribs aching, and the cabin lies on its side. She breathes slow to steady herself and starts working the problem. She runs march on herself with muscle memory. Massive bleeding gets priority as she spots a compound fracture across the left forearm. So she drives a cat tourniquet high and tight and checks the pulse return is absent. Airway and breathing are clear. Chest rise is even. Circulation needs attention at the leg. And she notes cool skin and tremor. She splints the right leg with straight branches and paracord, padding where she can to protect tissue. She moves methodically through the wreck. 2 in the cockpit are beyond help. The crew chief is still and broken. Her team leader has no pulse. And 2 soldiers lie motionless where the fuselage tore. She keeps her hands steady and her thoughts clean as she confirms 6 Kia without lingering. She nods once for each and turns to what must happen next. Mission-critical items come first. She takes an M4A1 with a partially loaded magazine and pockets 2 spare 30-round magazines. She secures the M18 sidearm, a PRC 152 with antenna whip, an IR strobe for identification, an M18 purple smoke grenade for marking, a small survival kit, water, and what remains of her aid bag. She avoids anything that throws light or sparks and leaves white phosphorus out of the plan. Through shattered plexiglass, she catches movement at the wreck perimeter. Fighters with AK pattern rifles sweep in, and the hard clatter of a PKM sets a base of fire. If they expect a rescue bird on the wreck, they may stage a man-pads team nearby, which would kill any helicopter that tries. She lowers her profile and slows her breathing. Staying here is suicide. She checks the tourniquet and splint, clips the radio inboard, and shifts weight onto her good side. She crawls for concealment. using the frame for cover before slipping into brush to create distance. Every inch costs, but distance is life. And she chooses to move. Avery drops off the shattered fuselage and hugs the terrain. She moves along a shallow stream to wash away blood sign and to keep her scent and noise low. The water is cold and steady against her boots, and the bank gives brief cover from the tree line. She keeps the radio clipped inboard, the IR strobe taped and silent, and the M4A1 high, where she can protect it from grit. She follows the creek bed until the slope folds into a small, natural depression. Branches go over her back to break the outline, while she leaves a narrow lane to the front. She checks the cat tourniquet only after a full breath and only when bleeding control allows. The splint on the right leg holds, so she pads a pressure point, takes a small drink, and inventories ammunition with care. The rifle carries a partial magazine with 22 rounds. 2 spare 30-round magazines ride in her vest for a total of 82. Far off, voices float across the rocks, and the hard clatter of a PKM starts hammering somewhere near the wreck. Fighters with AK pattern rifles spread wide and probe the brush. Confident and loud at first, then slow and patient when the valley swallows the sound. One figure breaks from the line and stumbles within 10 meters of her position. She plants the M4A1 against a trunk, finds the front sight, and fires on semi with controlled pairs. The target drops. She scans left and right, breathes, and lets her shoulders unlock. More movement ripples in the brush, so she reaches for her plan instead of a long gunfight. The M18 colored smoke grenade goes to a point that will screen the lane and not trap her in the hide. Smoke blooms and drifts. She shifts by short bounds, low and quiet, using the smoke as a curtain and the creek as a guide. The IR strobe stays off. She does not chase targets, and she does not feed a fixed position. At the next fold, she checks the magazine and counts 80 in reserve after the first exchange. 2 spare 30-round magazines remain plus a partial in the rifle. Distance beats pride today, so she turns toward thicker cover and keeps moving. At 2:15 a.m., Avery waits for the lull that always comes when the night is deepest and people are tired. She extends the PRC 152 antenna, checks encryption, and sends a short distress call on emergency traffic with calm cadence. She gives a complete MGRS with the 100-kilometer grid and 8 digits. For example, 38S, MB, 1234568, and mentions the map datum used by her unit. She keeps the transmission under 5 seconds and releases the push to talk to avoid triangulation. A Marine Recon element answers as Reaper 16 and issues an authentication challenge that matches her brevity card. Avery replies with the correct response and waits for confirmation before adding anything else. Overwatch breaks in and directs the recon team to remain on their primary task and to avoid diverting from the mission. Static fades and the net goes quiet as everyone listens for the decision that will follow. Staff Sergeant Mark Hendricks weighs the risk to his team and to the mission, then switches off the command net to limit interference while keeping a minimal link with Avery. He identifies his 4-person team by role so she knows who is coming. Corporal Jason Miller is JTAC qualified and will handle air when it arrives. Lance Corporal Tony Reyes holds rear security, and Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Ryan Alvarez is the Navy corpsman with medical gear. Hendricks tells Avery to hold position, conserve battery, and be ready to move on contact based on a 2-hour timeline that reflects terrain and distance, not bravado. Comms discipline stays tight on both ends, with short sentences and natural pacing. If line of sight fails, the team can shift to a PRC 117G or to SATCOM. But for now, they keep a low profile on VHF or UHF. Avery keeps the IR strobe off until asked for a brief blink and checks her sectors while staying low. The recon team checks their own sectors, sets noise discipline, and steps off toward her in the dark. The order from higher was no. The choice on the ground is yes. A wounded American is alone in hostile hills, and time is life. So they go. They accept the cost and commit to the rescue. The recon team moves through the hills under night vision, 12 kilometers in 90 minutes. Boots find quiet ground. Rifles ride high. And hands speak where voices would betray them. Gear is taped to kill rattle. A sentry on a spur drops to a suppressed carbine. Then a second folds to a knife behind a rock. They reach Rally Point Alpha at 3:45 a.m. and hold in shade. Hendricks asks for a blink, and Avery taps the IR strobe once, then kills it. The team slides into her hide without telegraphing movement. Knees low and muzzles calm. HM2, Ryan Alvarez, checks airway and breathing. Adjusts the cat tourniquet only as bleeding allows. Then refines the leg splint. He offers analgesia that she declines to stay sharp and anchors an IV line for contingency. They confirm ammunition and gear with quiet numbers. Avery carries about 68 rounds of 5.56 in total. 16 rounds of 9mm. 1 M18 colored smoke grenade. Water. A PRC 152. An IR strobe. And her aid bag. She drinks sparingly and keeps light and noise near zero. Roles are clear and the plan stays simple. SS Sergeant Mark Hendricks leads. Corporal Jason Miller will handle air later as the JTAC. Lance Corporal Tony Reyes holds rear security. And Alvarez supports movement. Hendricks briefs a 3-kilometer foot move to Bravo LZ with enemy elements between them and the pickup and sets expectations with calm confidence. Weapons are out. IR strobe stays off unless asked for a blink. And the team moves. They move in a disciplined file through broken timber and shadowed folds. SS Sergeant Mark Hendricks sets the formation with CPL Jason Miller up front to read the ground. HM2 Ryan Alvarez stays tight beside Avery Collins to steady her pace and watch her breathing. LCPL Tony Reyes holds rear security and drifts his gaze across likely approach lanes. A 4-man enemy patrol drifts in from the north as if pushed by the slope. The team freezes and lets the ground swallow them. The closest fighter fumbles an AK against rock and turns his head at the noise. Hendricks delivers a controlled pair on semi, while Miller and Reyes finish the rest in under 3 seconds. Stealth is gone, and the plan shifts without a word. Hendricks and Reyes post to cover, while Miller and Alvarez move Avery by short bounds over rooted soil and low stone. On the next signal, they reverse roles, and Miller and Alvarez hold as Hendricks pulls Avery forward. Hands talk more than voices, and each movement begins with a sector scan. Every string of fire is short and honest. Semi only, unless a target demands speed. Fingers brush magwells for quick counts, and eyes flash numbers. The team does not linger in one place long enough to be fixed. Sporadic PKM fire starts to rake from a flank and kicks dust from dead leaves. The gun is not quite on them yet, but it shapes the route. Hendricks angles across a fold to steal cover, and Miller marks the base of fire in his head for later. Reyes watches the rear and looks for flanking movement. They use smoke only when terrain runs thin. An M18 colored smoke grenade blooms where it will blind the enemy view but not trap the team. The IR strobe stays off to avoid compromise. When the smoke thins, they are already in motion again. Muzzle flashes blink inside the tree line and then disappear as the enemy shifts. The team trades short engagements and then changes position before the next wave builds. Shoulder squeezes pass down the file as silent confirmations. Crossfire checks happen before every step. Hendricks reads the pattern and knows contact will keep stacking. He needs a tactic that changes the odds. His eyes hunt for a narrow corridor where the ridge pinches the path. He asks Miller for a C4 block with a proper blasting cap and clacker and starts looking for the place to set a command detonation. SS Sergeant Mark Hendricks makes the call to split for a short run and pull the chase onto himself, while Avery Collins keeps moving with CPL Jason Miller, HM2 Ryan Alvarez, and LCPL Tony Reyes. The odds run heavy with roughly 15 enemy pushing out from the wreck. A PKM barking in bursts. And intermittent jamming from a pickup-mounted VHF or UHF jammer somewhere behind the ridge. Hendricks asks Miller for an M112 C4 block, an M6 blasting cap, shock tube, and an M57 clacker. He breathes once, checks the map in his head, and angles off the file. He finds a natural choke point where 2 rock spines pinch a footpath into a narrow lane. He digs shallow, sets the charge, seats the cap, routes the shock tube, and covers wire where brush and dirt hide shine. He confirms fields of fire and slides behind hard cover with a clean view into the kill zone. The clacker sits in his hand with slack managed and nothing snagged. To pull the lead element, he leaves a deliberate sound and sign trail that looks like a wounded American moving fast and sloppy. A broken branch points the way, a scuff mark on stone, and a bent weed line the corridor. Boots come quick and cautious, then faster when they sense they are closing the gap. Hendricks waits until the maximum bodies are inside the radius, and then command detonates with the clacker. The blast lifts dirt and splinters rock into sharp fragments. Shock slaps the trees and confusion eats the formation. But the effect is not magic and not clean. So Hendricks adds a short controlled engagement to finish the closest threats. He fires on semi, 3 or 4 measured shots. Then stops before he gets fixed by return fire. No shouting. No countdown. No wasted motion. He breaks contact with short sprints and brief halts. Checks his corners. And shapes pursuit with a few suppressed carbine shots when shapes press too close. He angles southeast toward the link-up and keeps the ridge to his shoulder as a terrain handrail. His breathing stays even and his pace stays honest. Distance builds and the noise behind him fades. Back with the main team. Miller and Alvarez move Avery by steady bounds, while Reyes scans for a flanking push. They listen for the blast to judge distance and timing, then steal a little more ground when the echo rolls the valley. Hendricks reads the terrain ahead, stays in front of regrouping fighters, and commits to rejoin on the next creek bend. Bravo LZ sits within reach if they hold their nerve and keep the clock on their side. They push the last stretch with the valley thinning toward Bravo LZ. Corporal Jason Miller and HM2 Ryan Alvarez share Avery Collins' weight, trading sides on quiet signals. Lance Corporal Tony Reyes drifts behind them and guards the rear. The file moves in short bursts that respect the broken ground. A 3-man element slips out of a fold ahead at close range. Miller and Alvarez slide Avery behind a fallen trunk and post to either side. 2 targets drop to short, accurate fire on semi, pressed low and controlled. Avery steadies the M4, a 1-1-handed. Breathes. And takes the 3rd with a clean trigger press. Alvarez shifts to medical reality before the next step. Cool skin, a rapid pulse, and drifting focus point to shock building under the pain wall. He starts an IV line and runs fluids per unit protocol. Then reassesses the CAT tourniquet and the splint for bleeding control and stability. An antibiotic goes into the plan for an open fracture in line with field guidance. They move past the jammer's shadow, and comms come back to life. Miller calls Overwatch with a concise sitrep in natural cadence and no wasted words. He requests fast air and a dust-off and caps it with a steady "we will hold." The net clears and the team sets their feet. At the edge of a small clearing, they build a tight 360 with sectors of fire. Quick-range cards go into the dirt. Arcs are deconflicted. And hard cover is picked on purpose. The IR strobe stays cold for now, ready for a brief blink when asked. An M18 purple smoke grenade sits staged for the landing. Small professional touches keep the machine smooth. Magazine checks happen without drama, and water sips are measured. Shoulder squeezes move down the file as silent confirmations. Eyes track likely avenues of approach and note where a PKM could lock them down. Distant movement and the echo of earlier contact keep tension climbing. The team breathes with the ground and resists the urge to shoot at shadows. They treat silence as a tool and time as a weapon. Every minute won is a safer arrival for the aircraft. Avery locks her breathing and keeps her thoughts simple and close. Her fingers find the coin pocket sewn into her sleeve and hold it like a promise. She tells them she can move when the time comes and means it. They believe her and settle in to survive the next minutes so they can make the ride home. The tree line stirs and then pushes hard. Flashes of AK fire stitching through brush while a PKM hammers in short bursts. The team holds a tight 360. bodies low behind chosen cover. Rifles on semi to conserve rounds. Breaths are measured and the clearing feels smaller with every crack. No one wastes a word. Corporal Jason Miller settles in as JTAC and runs a clean 9-line in natural cadence. He includes a full MGRS. For example, 38 SMB, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Marks friendlies by direction and distance. And ends with a danger close remark and his initials. The net answers with Navy FA 18EF Super Hornets checking in. Miller talks them on with flair. Ready to use a brief IR strobe blink if terrain description is not enough. The first pass arrives as a controlled 20mm strafe along the enemy tree line. Run in, heading and offset are safe. The pattern is tight, and the gun rips a straight seam where shapes were moving. Miller watches, impacts, and calls corrections in a steady voice. The team stays down and holds fire until the jet clears. A second pass follows for targets deeper in the woodline. The aircraft employs APKWS, or a GBU-54, based on sensor confidence and clearance. The effects are precise and contained, with fragments cutting branches and the ground shuddering once. Miller gives a quick battle damage check and shifts attention back to the perimeter. Enemy fire collapses in pieces rather than all at once. A few bursts spit from the dark and then die out as runners fade away. Miller receives the call that Dustoff is 2 minutes out and requests a smoke mark. The team confirms wind and throws an M18 purple smoke grenade into the clearing and calls mark as purple. An Army UA-60 Dustoff comes in low. Light, steady, and doors open. Door gunners scan arcs, while HM2 Ryan Alvarez and Corporal Miller move Avery Collins to the pickup point with smooth hands. Reyes keeps the rear covered and tracks the tree line for late movers. Hendricks watches sectors and manages muzzle discipline through the rotor wash. Northwest of the LZ by roughly 1 kilometer. Staff Sergeant Mark Hendricks pops a brief IR strobe blink to separate himself from enemy movement. He requests a shotgun run along a line that keeps friendlies safe and then breaks contact as the fighters finally disengage. The fast movers stitch the corridor clean and the hillside goes quiet. Hendricks turns back toward the link. Back at the clearing, the bird settles on the skids and the dust lifts like fog. Avery is loaded smoothly and strapped in, while Alvarez passes a quick handover to the medic on board. The team calls aircraft departing and holds security through the brownout. A second helicopter lifts the recon team soon after, and the night exhales. The radios fall to brevity and then to silence. Weapons go safe, but eyes stay up. The valley feels wider now, as if the trees have taken a step back. No one left behind is not a line. It is how they leave the hills. 2 weeks later, the hallways at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center carry the soft echo of carts and quiet voices. Avery Collins lies in a bright recovery room with her left forearm fixed after open fracture surgery and her right leg resting in a supportive frame. The swelling has eased, but the road ahead is long, with physical therapy measured in months, not days. She breathes steady and watches the light shift on the ceiling tiles. Staff Sergeant Mark Hendricks steps in with Corporal Jason Miller, Lance Corporal Tony Reyes, and Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Ryan Alvarez, all in dress uniforms that look crisp against the white walls. The visit feels simple and respectful. Word has already reached her that the team drew extra duty for disobeying orders, the kind that keeps you late and reminds you who holds the keys. At the same time, their command pushed recommendations for commendation forward, a balance that fits the real world. Hendricks sets a Marine Recon battalion unit coin on the bedside table and tells her in plain words that she belongs with them in spirit. Alvarez adds that she stayed in the fight when it counted and kept people alive by refusing to quit. Reyes grins like a man who would carry the same ruck again. Miller keeps it brief and steady. More presence than speech. The way professionals say, more by saying less. When they leave, the room grows very quiet. Avery turns the coin in her hand and feels its weight settle into her palm. She thinks about the choice to risk careers so a wounded American would not be left alone, and about the sound of rotors and the sudden stillness that followed. She makes a promise without ceremony to heal, return to duty, and pay it forward the next time someone needs a hand out of the dark. Night in Landstuhl is quieter than she expected. Avery Collins sits by the window and rolls a Marine Recon battalion coin across her fingers. The metal is cool and steady, like the voice that once cut through static and said, "We are coming." She lets memories line up without hurry or noise. She thinks of the valley, the fuel smell that would not fade, the ambush that bought minutes, and the breath she held as the IR strobe blinked once and went dark. She remembers the controlled gun runs that carved space at the tree line and the rotor wash at the Bravo LZ that tasted like dust and hope. Here it does not feel loud. It feels true. Her resolve is not a speech. It is a plan of small steps, dates on a board, and a promise to show up for every session until body and mind remember the rhythm. Heal, return to duty, and pay the rescue forward for anyone who gets lost, hurt, or left behind. Skill matters, discipline matters, courage matters, but the center of the story is loyalty. The simple rule that no one is left behind. Thank you for being here. Share this video if the idea speaks to you. And tell us in comments if you want a follow-up on JTAC 9 line or a breakdown of the March algorithm. No drama, just clarity that helps. Avery closes her fist around the coin and looks toward a morning that is not here yet.